All right, good morning. I'm with Pastor Tim Ward of Crossroads United Methodist Church. Appreciate you hopping on episode 10 of Dudes Advocating Mental Health.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So Tim is the lead pastor over at Crossroads. I am actually lucky enough to be one of his recipients of our wedding. He led our wedding, and it was amazing and beautiful, and I'll never forget it. And you've also been there on some tough days with some funerals. So I appreciate you being able to deal with the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, and just bringing everyone together. It means a lot.
Yeah, you know what? It's really a sacred experience to be able to walk through life with people. Folks give me a lot more latitude in those conversations than maybe they give other people. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to get to walk with people.
Absolutely. So that kind of brings me to my first question. Everyone sees the sermon on Sunday, but they don't see the visits at maybe the hospital, the funerals, the late night phone calls that you deal with, or families, dealing with really, really hard stuff. What's the emotional weight of being a pastor that most people never realize or see?
I've been doing this for about 20 years now. And when I first started, I actually started working with high school students and middle school students. And I don't think the roles shifted the reality. The reality is that folks have been dealing with challenges with mental health, challenges with life in general for a really long time. I think the emotional toll is I have to make sure that I'm keeping myself in check, that I'm paying attention to my own mental health, that I'm paying attention to my own wellness, that I have people in my life that I can journey with, talk to, walk through, as folks share some of the hardest realities in the world with me. As I said in the beginning, I really get to find myself in this, what I call this sacred space, and not sacred because it's of faith, sacred because people trust me with some of the hardest realities of their lives. And I'll tell you, it took me a long time to figure out how to compartmentalize that and not to carry everybody's realities. That's a challenge. It really is. When people share with you, I think I might have said it on Sunday. I was about to leave for the week. I was excited about the weekend. I was looking forward to Friday, Saturday, getting to do some things. And somebody called the church and said, someone in our family is having a funeral and most churches won't do the funeral. Would you be open to it? And I didn't get I was in a meeting, so I missed the call. But once I got the call, I said, I can't leave on a Thursday afternoon and leave that family for the weekend wondering if anybody's going to care for them in this time of real challenge, in this time of difficulty. So I think it's a balance. I don't give out my cell phone number to everybody because if I did, I'd be doing this at 3 o'clock in the morning most mornings. But there have certainly been times when I've walked through some of the most difficult moments in people's lives. I think the balance of that is to have people in my own life that are safe places for me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like in your position, dealing with, again, the highest of highs, lowest of lows, and being that steady hand, right? Being able to walk with someone and understand them is truly a blessing because personally, I wouldn't be able to do what you do because I also, wear my heart on my sleeve, and it's hard for me to step out of my own reality. And then when I hear someone else's reality, it weighs on me. So I appreciate what you do because I know not the average person could do it. So,
Yeah, Andy, thank you for saying that. I think I had to learn early on that uh, my job, I hate even calling it a job, my role in walking with people through those things is 99% listening and 1% advice. If I get in the place where I'm like, let me solve your thing, then I take your thing on. But if I'm in the place, I think most people in this world, most of the realities that they go through, they want someone to truly listen to them, whatever it is, even if they don't know what they're going to say. So I think that I had to learn early on in order to, I don't even want to say compartmentalize. I don't think you compartmentalize other folks' realities. I do think, though, in order for me not to take them on, I had to do some real work in learning how to listen instead of just, well, hey, you can fix that, dude. Just be happy, right? You can fix that. Just come play basketball. You can fix that. Go on a run with me. I think our natural tendency, and I'll say as Americans, I don't know if it's as humans because I haven't studied other cultures enough, But as Americans, is to try to fix the thing. If I would have known my friend was dealing with this hard thing, I could have fixed it. I can't tell you the number of calls I've gotten 11 o'clock at night. Hey, I've got this friend. I know this person in the church. I know this person in the community, and they're going through this hard thing. Do you think you could call them and just make sure they make it till morning? Whoa, 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 whoa. Like you can't fix it like that. It's not a light switch to turn on and off. I do think giving people space to share and know that there is someone in this world who's listening to them is a huge way to do what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hardest thing because we all can listen, but to truly understand and realize where someone's coming from goes beyond listening. You're actually understanding what someone's saying. So that's a whole nother level. And then you've stood beside people who have lost children,
Mhm.
spouses, parents. Have you ever experienced a moment where you personally wrestled with God and asked, why would you allow this for this person that's struggling? Like, I know it's hard not to talk to God in that way, but have you ever been like, why?
Oh, 100%. And I actually think God can completely handle that. That doesn't worry me at all to be like, God, why would this happen? Um, Years and years ago, I read this book, and I'm not even going to say the name of the book because I don't recommend it. Let me just say that. And in this book, there's the story of somebody who's lost their daughter, and this person confronts God and says, God, why would you allow this to happen? And God's response in that moment is, um, I am not a micromanager. I don't micromanage the world. I didn't let it happen. The world has that in it. Right? The world has that pain in it. And you can talk about it that way when it's a murder. It's much more difficult to talk about it that way when it's cancer. It's much more difficult to talk about it that way when I walked with a family years and years ago whose eighth grade kid, after eighth grade graduation, was having fun. He was standing on the roof of a building because that's what they did. And he stepped off the roof and stepped on an electric cord and died as an eighth grade child. And there's no real God explanation for that. So my first thing I would say is I think God can handle it. I think the entity, the deity, however you want to look at it in your own life, that I can scream at the most in this world is God. Like I think God can handle that more than anybody else that's in my life. And there are questions that I will have someday that I'll go, God, I just don't get it. I don't get why a world exists where people can kill each other. I don't get why a world exists where somebody can be fine one day when you look at them and the next day they have glioblastoma, cancer in their brain. God, I don't understand why a world exists where um, the mental health realities for people are so challenging and so hard that folks find themselves drowning in that reality. So there are lots of questions I ask. So I absolutely ask the questions. I think the other side of that to the questions, I feel like I regularly hear God saying, so do something about it. Be with people, walk with people. I remember years and years ago, uh, I was asked at a church where I was working to teach fifth grade students sexual education. And I promise this has a point, but it was such a weird thing. And I remember interviewing parents to go like, do you talk to your kids about this? Because so many people don't talk to their kids about it. They just assume they're going to figure it out. And with the internet today, kids will figure it out, just not in a good and healthy way, but they will figure it out. And I remember somebody saying to me, I have found the best time to have these conversations with my kid is in the car when they're in the back seat because they can't go anywhere and we're not looking face to face. And I think so much of this, especially when it comes to my conversations with God, I think the gift of that is I feel like sometimes I'm in the back seat and God's in the front seat and I can have that dialogue and I don't have to look face to face. The second piece of that sort of relates to this idea of men and mental health. We were having a dialogue at Wellness Loudon, which is a board that I sit on the other day, and we were saying, how do we get more men involved? And I said, I think the difference is, and it's not, I don't think we should paintbrush this with men and women. I think that's dangerous. But I think what I overheard in that meeting was women are much more comfortable sitting down and talking about feelings than men are. And I think we have to be really intentional as guys to reach out to one another, not to say, can we have tea and can we talk, but can we go for a run? Can we go throw axes? Can we go for a hike? Can we bowl to whatever in a way that, Andy, you and I are looking at a screen at each other, right in each other's eyes right now, but in a way where you don't have to look in the eyes of the person because that sometimes is difficult for people. And how do we create that space? So,
Yeah, no, I completely agree and I appreciate that because I feel like up until I'd say like 10 years ago, if you're a man, talking about your feelings was very taboo. You didn't do
absolutely.
it. You would if you did it, it was probably to a therapist.
Right.
And then at that point, you're already pretty deep in the dumps because when you accept talking to a therapist, you know you're struggling. And sometimes people don't even get to that point of being able to talk to a therapist. So up until 10 years ago, you just kind of took that depression, took that guilt, took that denial, whatever you're going through, and just swallowed it. And you just pushed it down lower and lower and lower until one day that balloon would pop
Right.
and people would go through X, Y, and Z. And we wouldn't know why these things were happening. And now 10 years, now we're in the present and we kind of are understanding like, look, that person was really struggling. They were dealing with major depression, they were dealing with major anxiety, and they didn't talk about it. But now I think we're in a better place where men are starting to come around to the idea like, hey, we should talk about what we're going through because if we don't even want to know the outcome because we've seen it too many times in our communities, in our friends, even celebrities and athletes. I mean, you're seeing it all over the place.
Of course.
So now creating mediums where men can talk about it, I think is super important.
Yeah, two things I would say to that. I think you're 100% right. I think it starts with you and I both have sons. And I think it starts with us when they're little, being able to talk about that. So much of, I think, parenting boys, in my experience, as I've observed, is boys when they're little can be rambunctious. And what we say to that is, you have to calm down. You have to settle down. You have to go have a timeout. You have to do this thing. However we navigate the craziness of boys in the way they act as kids. Instead of that, I wonder what it would be like if we started with them when they were little and just said, "Hey, tell me how you're feeling right now."
Hmm.
They might not always be able to describe it. They might be able to say, "I'm angry. I'm really excited. I'm happy." So I think that's a real piece of it. The second thing I will say is there was a study done in, I believe, 2023 by Inova identifying the number one health crisis in Loudoun County, which is where we're located. And the number one health crisis in Loudoun County was mental health. And as you dug deeper and deeper into the study, what you found was it does not discriminate. Not based on cultural background, not based on gender, not based on age, meaning mental health challenges can be a reality for anybody in any age and stage. And I think, and cultural background, and I think that's the important piece for us, to your point in this dialogue today, not just on this call, I'm saying in today in this time, how do we continue to have dialogue in a world where I actually think because of a lot of outside factors, people are shutting down dialogue with people? How do we reopen that dialogue with friends? One of the best seasons of my mental health in my life, I know this is going to be hard to believe, was during COVID. Why was it during COVID? I had a buddy who came over 3 mornings a week at 5 a.m. and we social distanced on a run. Like we'd go out and just the two of us, and we didn't talk about work. We didn't talk. We just talked for 5 miles, 3 days a week, and it was like one of the most life-giving things I've experienced from a mental health perspective in my life. I think we've got to reopen that conversation, not just, "Hey, how's your mental health?" Just, "How are you? What's going on in your life? Tell me about it." Because I also think not only does it lead, as you talked about, we repress those feelings. Not only does it lead to, uh, potentially catastrophic realities, it also leads to life just being real hard. It leads to work not being enjoyable. It leads to sometimes domestic violence. I mean, all of this stuff pushed down can really blow up. We have to pay attention to it. And I think as people who care for one another in friendships, we need to ask those questions. I think guys' weekends are really important. I think doing the drive, I remember again, another thing years ago, I needed to help my parents move furniture out of their house. And a good friend of mine was like, I'll ride with you. I'll go do it. And I'm like, why would you spend your day this way? He's like, because we get to hang out all day. It's that sort of thing. How do we do that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the hardest thing is getting away from surface level stuff like, oh, how's work? How's the kids? How you watched the game the other day? Who's your favorite draft pick? Like the easy
Right.
stuff that we could ramble on for hours on, but digging deeper, peeling back the onion, I think that's the hardest thing for anyone. And if you're willing to have those hard conversations, and you don't have to ask 10 questions. If you just ask one question and say, tell me how you're really feeling or something along those lines, the impact will be great. And then that'll lead me into my next question. So, you're constantly encouraging everyone else when you're the one struggling potentially. Who pastors the pastor? Have you ever found yourself spiritually or emotionally empty?
Oh, 100%. I would say there have been multiple seasons. One is I have three other guys that ever since 2017, they're also pastors. We meet every Thursday afternoon via phone call, and we do at least one, if not two trips a year together where we're checking in on each other. The first question we ask on most of our calls is who needs time today? Who needs time? Who needs to talk? Second thing is I have had a coach ever since 2014. I've never gone without a coach in all that time. Somebody that can go and 9 times out of 10, my coach's first question is, "How can I support you? How are you?" So I think who pastors the pastor? It's that. It's also funny. Somebody a few weeks ago, might have even been a few months ago. As you know, Andy, I often like to stand out front on the sidewalk and greet people before worship. And somebody said, "How are you?" And I guess I'm usually one to say, "I'm great, doing great, having a great week." And it had been a tough week. We had lost two people in the church. There had been some other stuff. And I was like, I'm okay. I didn't say I was great. And he sent me this like 5 paragraph email. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I never think about how you're doing. Like, I want you to know I am praying for you and I am thinking about you. So I think it's part of it is people who are encouraging others also have to be vulnerable. So in those moments when I'm vulnerable, I absolutely feel like people support me, but I have a support network very intentionally of people who aren't part of the church, meaning the church that I serve, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes along with a lot of the leadership roles in America, like the CEO, the teacher of the classroom, the doctor, the nurse, the PA, people with leadership roles, the mom, the dad, someone who's really leading the cause. Um, Seldom do people ask, "Hey, how you doing?" And I think it goes a long way when you understand someone's position, especially a pastor, who's someone who's dealing with life, death, anger, depression, and just checking in on your people because you never know what someone's really going through.
Absolutely, 100%. That checking in, we cannot minimize that. I'll give you two quick examples. A few years ago, gosh, it might have even been 10 years ago now, I had a friend who was a pastor, and we were headed to what we call annual conference, which is a gathering we do every year of all the pastors. And about 2 weeks before, he had reached out to me, and I said, I'll see him at annual conference. I'll get there. Well, I get to annual conference, he's not there. Not there at all. Come to find out, he had had an affair with somebody. I think he was probably calling me to ask for advice and how to navigate that. He had lost his credentials as a pastor. And to this day, that was probably at least 10 years ago, to this day, he and I have never had a conversation about it, probably because I never returned that phone call. Another guy showed up as a pastor to my church for worship July 3rd, whatever. And I said, I didn't see him as he came in, but he came through communion, he came through my line, and he said, I said, "Oh, you got the Sunday off?" He goes, "Something like that," and he left. And I did not phone call and follow up. He was dealing with real difficulty, real challenge, ended up stepping out of being a pastor, and I didn't follow up. So there are two things that happened back to back. that now, if I have that spidey sense, I pick up the phone and call, no matter what. Because there are too many times, I think, when we get that moment and we let it go, and then something like that happens.
Yeah, no, that's completely true. You know, and then mental health has become so much bigger than just a conversation over the last decade. Why do you think so many Christians, especially, still feel guilty admitting they're anxious, depressed, or overwhelmed? And what message would you give them?
Honestly, I think the reason so many Christians especially feel that way is because I think a lot of the church for many, many years told people you couldn't feel that way. You should have joy. You are a Christian. You should feel this way. You should feel that way. When I don't actually think the Bible says that at all. The Bible may say that do not be anxious about anything. By all things in prayer and petition, it may say that. But I don't think it says, if you read the Psalms, about a third of them are about people's anxiety and about God meeting them right in the midst of their anxiety. If you read the story of Job, it's a guy who's going through a lot of pain and God meeting Job in the midst of his pain. If you look at the interactions Jesus has with people, there's a man who's been tied up for years because he's dealing with mental health crisis and the whole community tells him he's not valuable and Jesus comes and tells him he's valuable and he's unchained. Like I think so much of the reason people don't deal with it is because the church has shamed people for naming mental health wellness. I also think our culture has shamed people for so long. And I think we have to debunk that. We have to let that out. So I think the big piece of this is we have to shift from a culture of shame to a culture of freedom.
Mhm.
One of my favorite Bible verses of all the Bible verses is John 10:10, where Jesus says, I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. I think there are so many churches that don't preach that Jesus is about life. They preach that Jesus is about rules or about shame or about difficulty or about challenges or about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and being the man of God that God wants you to be. When Jesus, in that moment, in that question, in that challenge, says, I've come that you might really live. And really living means that we don't have to have shame for the realities of our life, for the health challenges, for the mental health challenges, and all that kind of stuff. You asked a second question. I can't remember that. You said, why do we think people have challenges
Yeah,
in the
so
church? What was the second one?
my second question was what message would you give them, those Christians that feel guilty
Hmm.
about dealing with mental health?
I think as people who call yourself a Christian, a follower of Jesus, I think we have to model for the rest of the world how we are loved. And when we allow our guilt to outweigh the love, we model for the rest of the world that you should feel guilty for your mental health. I think we have to release that. I think we have to name it, which means I think in the church we have to talk about it more. I think we have to be open. I think we have to stop using the C word, crazy, right? How often do I hear people say, oh my gosh, she's so crazy, he's so crazy, right? When people are dealing with mental health, when people are wrestling with that, and I hear it in the church as much as I hear it anywhere else. So I think we have to stop that, and I think we have to be really open about walking with people through those realities. We've had mental health realities in my own family, and for years they were pushed down and hidden. I think we have to raise those up, not as doesn't that make that person terrible, but raise that up as how do we walk with that person and love that person as they're doing it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think loving someone when they're at their lowest and loving someone at their best is a challenge because obviously, like you said, when someone's acting crazy, your tendency is to kind of let's give them some space. Let's let them deal with what they're dealing with, and then we'll circle back.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you might not get that chance if you aren't comforting someone when they're going through per se their crazy period, you might not see them again, and you might not know what they're dealing with deep down. So being able to understand, like, hey, they could be going through something really bad. They could be going through something catastrophic, and maybe they're just not ready to talk about it. They're going to keep saying they're fine, and they're going to keep lashing out, but just standing with them and helping them realize, like, hey, I'm with you. I got your back And it might not be all right now, but if we get out of this dark season, it'll start getting better. And walking with people is definitely, not an easy thing.
Mhm.
But I think it's one of the things we need to, as a community, continue to do.
Yeah, I agree.
And then, obviously you have three beautiful children, a dog, and you're married, great life. So your first ministry is your family. Yet the church can demand so much of your time. Have there been moments where you felt like ministry was costing you some precious moments with your wife and kids? And how have you navigated this?
100%, especially early on. When my kids were little, I would do every single thing that someone requested of me in the church. And I missed so many of their years, especially when they were younger. And I think through each new church that I have served, I have set even more boundaries. Like, I don't regularly give out my cell phone number anymore. I used to give my cell phone number to everybody, but the problem with cell phones is you're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I don't give my cell phone number out. I put out of office on my emails on Fridays and Saturdays so that it's not every Friday and Saturday I'm getting, questions. I think for me, Andy, and this is where you and I are in such a different place, when my kids were your kids' age, I felt like I had forever with them. And now, as I look at my kids, as I look at the fact that our youngest two kids are seniors in high school this year, our oldest is in college. Next year, after the school year's over, it is my wife and I need to make sure we still have a relationship, right? Post kids and what that's like. In the last 5 years or so, as we have started to navigate this transition into teenagehood and then ultimately into college and adulthood, um, I just have had to say to others and to myself, um, they're just more important. It's just what I have to do. And I've had to intentionally say that. And there are probably things that I've missed. There was this really cool event that happened on Saturday that I would have loved to have gone to that was connected to the church and connected to the community. And I just said, I'm not going to do it because my family needs me today. And I think wisdom and time in life has helped me navigate that differently. My hope, I was always worried, and my wife and I have talked about this a lot, that once the kids were out of the house, I would just work all the time. Like I would never stop working because I don't have to go to games anymore. I don't have to go to this stuff. And we have been really intentional about trying to set some structures in place for the two of us that mean that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the hardest thing, with doing something you love, or maybe not something you love, but providing for your family is
Mm-hmm.
saying no. And I think as especially men, we want to continue to provide and be the best we can be for our family, but it comes at a cost. It
Mm-hmm.
comes at a major cost because you're missing out on some of these major milestones, major events, and um, as you get older, saying no to those events is definitely something that I think is beautiful. I have this year I've missed out on, I won't say missed out, but I had to refer two deals because I was like, I got a lot going on right now. I'd rather be with my son than take this on right now. And I think it's God's way of being like, you know what? You just take a beat. It'll
Right.
come back around. It's
Yeah.
not going to be your last sale. So I think it's understanding that and accepting it is a beautiful thing.
My current coach says this to me all the time, and I love it. She says, the word no is a complete sentence. You
Right.
don't have to say no because da 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 da. Somebody can say, "Hey, are you able to do this?" And you can go, "No." That's a complete sentence.
Yeah.
We don't owe people, well, it's because I need to care for my son and my son has this thing coming up and this, or it's because I need to take my wife to the airport and I need to do this. No is a complete sentence. It's all right. And I've worked
Yeah.
really hard on no.
Yeah, no, I
I've,
love that. I love that. And I had a podcast last week with Ken Harvey, and he was saying, "Let your no be no and your yes be yes," and that's what it needs to be. Just
right.
let people understand that those two and three letter words are powerful, and people need to respect that.
That's exactly right.
So the greatest misconception about God, if you could erase one misconception people have about God, faith, or Christianity, what would it be? And why do you think so many people still believe it?
I'll connect back to what I said earlier about the church. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about God is that God is an angry God that wants to put God's thumb on us and say, let me watch, and God's out there standing around the corner waiting for us to fail. I think the church has perpetuated that reality. I certainly grew up early in my life in a church that perpetuated that reality. And I think what I would want people to understand is that God is for you. Like God is not this judgmental God that wants to catch you in something. God is not a trickery. God is for you, and God wants life for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a hard misconception for people to realize, but it's the reality. I mean, coming from someone that studies God, studies the Bible, I think it's important for people to hear it from you. So I appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely.
And then for the person that is potentially too far gone, someone who's watching that feels who believe that they've made too many mistakes, hurt too many people, or drifted too far from God, looking directly into that camera, what would you say to them to hopefully bring them back and shift their identity, whether it's a small step or big step? What would it be for you to help get them back on the right track?
Two things. I'll give you a story, real quick story in a scripture. A quick story is years ago I was running a booth at an Oktoberfest in Reston, and late at night, and as it got darker and darker, people got drunker and drunker. And there was a woman that came to our booth, and she said, "What's your booth about?" And I said, we're this new church. We're trying to figure out how to do church differently." And she goes, "Oh, I can't do church. I I have done so many things. I've been so awful. I've been so bad, and da 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 da." And her and I started having this dialogue, and I said, "I don't think that's true. I don't think there's anything you can do. I don't think you can be too bad." And I said, I shared a little bit of my own story with her, and how I don't feel like I'm too far from God for God and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, I said, "Tell you what," she wanted me to participate in this work thing that she was doing. I said, "I'll participate in your work thing if you check out my church." And she looked at my card and she goes, "Oh my God, you're the pastor?" Right? It was this moment of like, I just told this pastor all this stuff I've done in my life. And I will tell you, I've never, and I say this really intentionally, I've never met somebody that I think is too far for God. Because I think God is constantly reaching out. The image we get in Luke 15 of this father that stands out at the road and just waits and waits and waits longingly is the image I get from God. And the second thing from scripture that I will tell you is from the Bible. Paul, who starts off as one of the most judgmental people in the world, writes that there is nothing in life or in death that can separate us from the love of God. So Paul, who was incredibly judgmental, was transformed enough to know that there is nothing in life or death you can do. So I don't even say walk into a church as the first thing. I think that can be a really hard thing. I think the first thing might be to just start looking in the mirror and saying, "You're never too far from God. God loves you." That'd be my first thing.
Yeah, no, and I love that, and I appreciate that because I think you said it in scripture 2 or 3 weeks ago about I forget the story, but the gentleman who was stealing from his civilization, and he was in jail for 18 years or whatever for stealing a loaf of bread.
Yep.
Um, and he was seen as an outcast. He was a criminal. Um, and just accepting him when the priest, and he took all the stuff from the priest, and then the priest forgave him and was like, "No, no, I let him have it all." And he forgot two of the most valuable things. And that changed his whole life. And then he was on a path of forgiveness, for life, for love. Um, and I think being able, and that goes the same for everyone, being able to understand that maybe that criminal or that addict or maybe that person who's been really not a good person, they have good in them, and helping them realize that you're not too far gone, and God still loves you is something that's a powerful thing, and we need to do more of in this lifetime.
I agree.
Well, Tim, you're the man. I appreciate you hopping on. Means a lot, and really appreciate everything you said. I think the whole premise of this was for that one person, and I think one person will watch this today and get a lot out of it.
Thanks, Andy. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for the work that you're doing. And I would say to anybody that listens to any of these podcasts, um, somebody loves you. Find the person that loves you. Hang out with them. It'll
I
be
love
good.
that. Means a lot.
Awesome. All right, buddy.
Talk to you soon.
Take care, Andy.
Bye.